All right, guys. I think we're going to get started here. And so I want to thank you again all for coming out. It's been a week so far. It's been awesome. Day one of many, and leading right up into ETHDenver. I don't know about you guys, but I am really excited about some of the stuff that's going on, I guess just in general, in trying to build out like how we're going to make all these technologies be become mainstream, right? So Justin Caswell here from RevoKind is going to be telling us about what we can learn from the past to maybe really drive forward these technologies into the future and really see all of this adoption happen that we so much desire. So I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So my name is Justin Caswell. I'm with RevoKind. Just to give you a little quick brief background on myself. So I've got about 18 years in communications infrastructure systems. I started off in DoD contracts with NORAD, Peterson, Schriever. So I started off building huge microwave systems, satellite systems, that kind of stuff. Went on to autonomous systems. I've done geographic information systems, big data. Also got into, obviously, cryptography along the way, and a few other things. So all of those kind of combined as what brought me to kind of the project and the things that we're working on today. So just to give you a little background on kind of our project, right? So this is something that I started probably around 16 years ago. Obviously it's kind of morphed into what it is today. But originally it started off as an autonomous system for geographic information systems and upstream resources, right? Primarily any type of asset that you can think of. So whether it's energy-based, maybe it's an upstream oil and gas facility, or maybe it's a transportation facility. So anything that's kind of upstream, right? What I was actually trying to do whenever I started this project a long time ago was to bring it into the business world to where it made sense from an enterprise level, right? That you could actually cut costs and save time and have eyes on real time all of your assets and resources company-wide, right? So all the way from upstream assets all the way to the Wall Street floor, and so now you're not losing any data and information. So that's where it kind of was born out of, but over the years it has now kind of metastasized into something a lot greater than that. So what we're here to talk about today is kind of my business development strategies. And so I've been in business and business admin for probably around, I want to say 12 years now. So serial entrepreneur. I've had a couple of different successful businesses. I've worked on different technology platforms, but I've also been a CTO for other companies as well and helped develop their technology platforms. So the strategy behind a lot of those, right, is all about mass user adoption. So whenever you talk about a brand new technology, how do you get people to buy into it? Right? I mean, we've all heard of crossing the chasm. We all know the different kind of strategies that are out there, right? For say older technologies that have come out in the past. We've seen different technologies have different effects, different stories for each one of them, right? But they all kind of have something that's similar, and that's kind of what I want to be able to talk about today, right? So whenever we talk about blockchain as a whole, I mean, we obviously know that we have some serious benefits to it, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. We're all in this room because of it. There's thousands of people building projects every day because of it, right? But what's the reality that we're actually facing right now? And it's that if you go and you look on State of Dapps, I think it's stateofdapps.com. I mean, as of today, I think you have around 87,000 daily active users. That's unique users. So if anybody believes that 87,000 daily active users with the thousands of projects out there for just dApps is enough, I think you're sorely amiss, right? So I think we need to do better. We need more. We need more people using these dApps that are being created. We need people actually using this technology in a way that's going to change their lives and change the future, right? That's the whole goal. But how do we do that? I think the key is in looking at kind of some of the past, right, and understanding what that is. So if you can look at kind of the acceleration over the years, right, from kind of the original old school technologies to modern technologies, there's a trend, right? What is that trend? It's that consumption spreads faster today. It's a known fact, right? Why do you think that is? Well, we've got more information, more capability, technology-wise, larger logistics, we're a more connected world, right? So as time goes on, whenever a new technology comes out, it can accelerate for adoption, right? All the way to 100% of US households. Now obviously, this chart is just for US, but you can kind of duplicate that across the globe, right? It's kind of the same theory. So if it's true for these newer technologies, like specifically the cell phone, right? Look at how quickly that the cell phone became a part of our active daily lives, how quickly we adopted it. Other countries actually skipped regular phones and just went straight to cell phones. It's kind of a phenomenal thing, right? So whenever you look at this trend, it kind of brings up the question of like, okay, well, blockchain's been around for a while, distributed technology's been around for a while, cryptography's been around for a while, all of these technologies have been around for a while. Right now we've combined them into something that's a little bit more unique, but it's been around long enough. Where's the mass adoption? Why is it not catching on as fast as these other technologies? Right? So those are the big questions that we have to ask. So just to have a little reference, because I'm not sure how many people actually know or have seen this. So Geoffrey Moore, back in 1991, he wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm. It's a pretty good book. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty well known. He's done a lot of different interviews about it. This is kind of like business 101, right? Whenever you start talking about marketing and taking a new technology to market. So you always have, your innovators, and you have that small chasm right there where you try to get your early adopters on, right? So that's a brand new startup, a brand new company, brand new product. You try to get as many early adopters as you can to get across that little chasm, right? So typically, especially in our world, we're talking about developers, right? We want to get people developing on our platform, or we want to get people using that technology in some form or fashion. Same goes for tennis shoes, watches, products, software, anything, right? You want to get those first people that love your product, using it every day, talking about it more and more and more. The hard part is getting across that giant chasm right there that we're talking about. So we have a lot of early adopters in blockchain, right? There's quite a few. Daily active users, like what I said, right? So 87,000 on dApps today for stated dApps. So how do we get across the big chasm, right? Well, it's a little bit different than most technologies, in my opinion, right? But I think that one of the things that I've seen kind of as a trend, every conference that I go to or every discussion that I have, especially people that I've never talked to about blockchain before, people that are brand new to the technology, they've never even heard of it, right? How do you make it so simple that they understand it? How do you make it so simple that they get it, right? You can explain it all day, but now how are you going to get a technology in front of them to where it's actually simple for them to use, simple to understand? Those are the big questions that we have to ask ourselves. It's like, okay, well, what's the strategy that we're actually going to put to use to get mass adoption? And so if we look at some of the past technologies, right, there was very specific key strategies that they used. And so some of those were called strategy matching, right, is what it's called. And so it's actually taking specific products and matching it to use cases. It's focusing on the problem itself, not the solution. Right? The solution comes later. So whenever you're talking about getting across that giant chasm, you have to really sell the problem. Right? So right now, a lot of people out there, the general public, right outside of our community of blockchain, they have no idea what the problem even is. They've never even heard of it. Right? So there's an educational piece that has to take place. There has to be a lot of conversation, a lot of media, publicity, and it's growing, right? But we already have solutions. We're already trying to push solutions, right? And I'm not saying that they're bad or good or that there's a wrong or a right way. So just to be clear, right? This is just my opinion, my strategy from my years of experience that I'm trying to implement. So one of the things that I really like to talk about, whenever we talk about new products, is strategy matching. So for example, with my company, what our goal is we did exactly that, right? And it took us a while to kind of narrow it down. So I started off with this enormous project that I really kind of wanted to solve a lot of different issues, a lot of problems that the blockchain community is facing today, right? And whenever I did that, I kind of bit off a little bit more than I could chew. And so whenever I was going to investors and VCs and even talking to like people in the community, they were like, man, you know, this is brilliant, it's great, it's awesome, but it's way too much and it's scary, right? So can you scale it down? Can you make us understand it at a real simple level? And so we had to do that. So it took a lot. So what I actually did is I took the core 4 products out of everything that we had created. And that core 4 products was Swarm Sync. So that's my own consensus algorithm. It's actually built on named data networking, right? So it's a future internet architecture. And then we actually did, we took swarms, which are, you know, exist in peer-to-peer networks. So even like on BitTorrent, for example, right? You get in there, you see your existing swarms for file sharing. So what I did is I actually took those swarms and I actually made them do the consensus work. So, and we can talk more about that later, but what I can tell you is that right now the math has given us around 3 to 4 million transactions per second, and we're actually going to load test that with a strategic partner who has the ability for us to spin up thousands of nodes to load test that. Dynamic smart contracts is another piece of this, right? So what's the problem with smart contracts today? Right? Smart contracts today, although they're awesome, they gave us business logic, right? They give us the DAO, but now they're proprietary language. You have to bring in a team of programmers, and oh, by the way, if something goes wrong, they're not that easy to fix, right? So what we did is we said, okay, well, how can we make this something that's more fluid, especially for businesses, right? And oh, by the way, what about the 80% of small business out there? It's still enterprise level. So 80% of enterprise businesses, you know, they don't have the technical resources, they don't have the funding or the capability, let alone the in-house knowledge, right, to efficiently and effectively roll out smart contracts, right? So now this is actually coming from conversations that I've had with enterprise level companies. They said, yes, we've tried Ethereum. You know, we're having problems because it's not scalable, or it's taking too long to write these contracts, or it's not really playing well with our current systems. And even if we wanted to create our own token and all these other things, right, there's all of these kind of like barriers. Right? And so eventually they become frustrated and they start looking at other solutions. And that's where R3 kind of comes in, Hyperledger comes in, they start going down these different paths, and we start talking to them, and they start kind of opening up, and they say, you know, here's all of the issues that we have with actually rolling out smart contracts. So even a Hyperledger has its issues where, you know, you have to create hundreds of channels for, you know, an enterprise level business. It's not manageable whenever you really start looking at it and considering it. Now, that's not coming from me, this is coming from the actual companies that we've had discussions with. So another one is the multi-one payment, right? So what is that? So if you look at a transaction today, like a singular transaction, most transactions occur in one currency, right? So if I wanted to transact with anybody on the planet, I typically have to do it in one type of currency per transaction. Right? Now there's some people out there, you can actually do a little bit more than that, but not really. It's typically a singular currency, and maybe there's an exchange in there somewhere, maybe it's a chained payment, right? But it's typically just one currency. The multi-one payment system that we designed is actually the ability to take any type of fiat and cryptocurrency asset in a single transaction and pay right then and there, right? Both online and offline. So we have offline capabilities. So what does that mean? That means that, okay, well now I can do chain payments in any currency through a singular transaction. So I can actually take a payment from my upstream consumer, right? And then I can actually pass that on real time to my vendors and also to myself. And I can, oh, by the way, autonomously pay out anybody else that works for me, right? All autonomous. Now, getting that to kind of like the finality, right? So if I'm paying somebody downstream, well, if my customer paid me, let's say in 4 different currencies, like let's say they paid 20 something, right? 20 units. So 20 units in, so 5 in USD, maybe 5 in pesos, maybe 5 in Litecoin, 5 in Bitcoin. So I take those 20 units, right? So now I have the automatic network costs through the Revo Exchange platform. So I know what those network costs are. We can build it into the dynamic smart contracts fluidly. And we can do online and offline transactions through our Swarm Sync. And oh, by the way, downstream to our vendors and other users and employees, we can chain those payments in exchange in real time for payouts, right? So this is kind of the stack. This is what we tried to strategically do as far as matching what our enterprise customers were telling us that they needed and wanted. Right? So this wasn't us just going, oh, well, let's just make up some products here. We actually had to go and listen to our customers. We had to actually go and have these conversations. And we said, okay, well, how are we going to match enterprise level? First of all, let's back up. Why are we going after enterprise? Right? That's the big question. I mean, all of this kind of makes sense. This is what everybody's trying to get to, right? But why go enterprise? I mean, Hyperledger kind of did that to some extent, right? IBM and everybody else kind of got together and they're like, hey, let's go after enterprise. So there's a strategy there that I think that most people kind of miss. And I don't know if you guys pay attention to Hyperledger that much, but they're kind of winning right now on the enterprise side, right? Which, good or bad, indifferent, I think that there's kind of a purpose there. So whenever Big Blue does something, I tend to pay attention, just because they've been successful with so many products for so many years consecutively, right? So their strategies matter. So taking those lessons from them, it's like, okay, well, why would they go after enterprise? It's because of how many users there are. So we developed our business model canvas kind of wrapped around that exact strategy, right? We actually analyzed what they were doing. We also analyzed kind of some of the other companies out there at the enterprise B2B level. And this is what we came up with. So this was a lot of hours hashing this out and deciding how we were going to take this approach, what our strategy was actually going to be, how we were going to get mass adoption with our product. So it's like, great, yeah, maybe we get one sale to one enterprise company. Is that going to be enough? Maybe. Depends on how big that enterprise is, right? And if they do it, then somebody else is going to do it too. And so that's where it starts. So what we did is we focused on the enterprise level side, companies that have current user base in thousands and millions. That's our target, right? So we entered the market directly into information, so telecom companies specifically. So we targeted them. So currently we have 2 strategic partnerships with telecommunications companies that have millions of users. And we're actually in the process of spinning up our proof of concept over their network. And then we'll actually be rolling it out to low Earth orbit satellite systems and terrestrial systems as well. And why does that matter? Well, think about this. So if we were able to roll this out into these companies, right, and they integrate it in, and they start using these new technologies, and it plays with both their traditional systems, and it takes them where they want to go strategically into the future, and oh, by the way, it uses blockchain technology, right, that's a huge win for all of us. Because now we can actually take and apply that to every enterprise company out there. And oh, by the way, if we get enough of them using this, now we have interoperability. Now on top of that, one of the other things that we really want to try to focus on, right, is that we want to work with existing blockchain companies to get interoperability with their systems too. Right? So I've already been talking to EOS, submitted a project to them, hoping to hear back from them. So we've been talking to them for 4 months now. So I think that we're really close to having some type of, I guess, outline partnership and structure with them. So then that way we can actually start doing interoperability with EOS, which is pretty exciting stuff. And then obviously this week I'm here to try to find the same thing with Ethereum. So this is our business model canvas that we've been kind of sticking to. Obviously this is a working document. We're always trying to kind of make it a little bit more refined, but this is where we sit right now. So the idea is that we take these SDKs, right, these core 4 products, we roll them into SDKs and also kind of like plugins, and we make it to where it's licensable and scalable for these enterprise companies. And we can roll this out, right, so everybody kind of wins. I mean, we still have a business to run, so we've got to make some money off of this. We still have people to pay, right? If we're going to scale this up, we're going to have to support it. So, and I think that's another kind of like difference between, I guess, you know, the open source model versus, you know, the private model. And I think the ultimate goal, and I've always told everybody this since day one, is that, you know, once we get this spun up enough, I want to open source this. I want to create our own like public chain out there, right? That kind of works with all these like enterprise that anybody can dev off of, and not just enterprise companies, right? So we create this open source public blockchain that now has a lot of interoperability with these enterprise companies that are already using this product. And it makes sense, right? The strategy is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. If we get enterprise companies to buy in, right, and we have thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of users already currently using the technology, right, and then we open it up to the public, create a separate public blockchain, right, that uses the same kind of technology, right, and also, by the way, we're forming strategic relationships with current companies and blockchains that are already out there. This is the way to leap across that chasm. I mean, that's the strategy. It sounds fairly straightforward, fairly easy, right? But actually pulling it off is a whole other gambit. But we're getting close. So this is where we're at right now, and I'm actually really excited about it. There's some big things that are happening this week with this technology, and we're actually talking to some pretty big players right now. But the one thing that I think I kind of want to like drive home is that if you look back at that chart, right? So those existing technologies from the past, one of the things that drove mass user adoption was that those technologies were created or invented by somebody and then licensed or sold, right, to a company that had the ability to roll it out to the masses. They already had huge amounts of user base, right? Whether it was microwave technology or telephones or cell phones, and it just progresses, right, through the years. So there's something to be said for taking a technology, right, and handing that off or partnering with, in some form or fashion, enterprise companies that have massive users already, right? So why try to recreate the wheel whenever you can just strategically place yourself and your technology in front of millions of users overnight? Maybe they don't even know they're using it. The only thing that they're really going to care about is it 1,000 times better than what I've been doing right now, and is it going to save me money? That's what most users care about, right? So if we can do that from the back end, where it's kind of, maybe not seen or heard, that's okay. I'm fine with that. As long as it's actually benefiting the end users, and as long as it's actually benefiting the blockchain community in some form or fashion, and I believe it is. The companies that we're working with, they're not trying to steal the thunder away from any other project that's out there right now. They want in the game too, right? But they need a solution that works for them. And so that's what we've been doing, and I believe that that's what the focus should be on, at least for us strategically. Now, I think you can take these kind of strategies and modify them in a, whatever way, shape, and form that you see fit that works for your company, right? Or works for your project. But keeping those strategies in mind, those are the things that have actually allowed technologies in the past to leap across that chasm and actually get mass user adoption. I'm going to give you a perfect example. So Steve Jobs, when he first sold his computer, right? He didn't sell it out on the street on his own. He went to somebody else and sold it to them, right? And they put it together and then sold it. That's how he got his start, right? Every technology out there has to have some type of, backing. You can't just do it on your own. And I think that we've done really good as a community so far, but like I said in the beginning, I think that we can do better. And I believe that this is the road and the path to open up mass user adoption and also interoperability. Thank you. can do questions.
So, context, I used to work on Hyperledger at IBM on the Maersk project. I was the product design lead with their supply chain stuff. The thing I wonder about, I've since now worked on a theory of consensus, but the thing that worried me about what Hyperledger was doing, and something that I'm wondering if you're trying to emulate or if you have any strategies to hedge against, is Maersk and other large enterprise chains that have a kind of spin up a private chain for their use case have a problem with governance. So the lawyers get involved, now everybody wants zero knowledge proofs, right? And so they want to roll these into their contracts, right? And nobody can make a decision on how to do this, because that can't be handled on chain. And Maersk, for instance, had the problem of not all of their competitors that they need to be on the chain for it to become an industry standard didn't want to join Maersk's blockchain. Right. And they are going through that right now. So I wanted to know, is that something you've thought of? Is there strategies built in here that maybe I missed around how these enterprises that are going to hopefully be working together either on one giant enterprise chain or a number of enterprise chains for different use cases, how they collaborate and make decisions at that governance level about how the chain gets upgraded moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair and solid question. So there has been some thought put into that. Obviously, I don't have all the answers, right? There's still a lot of things that we have to figure out. But I think that the core concept here is that, well, if we can give enterprise an actual real solution that's easily adaptable and scalable, that's step number one, right? And then if we can apply that to multiple enterprises, then it's kind of easier to duplicate the exact kind of relationships that they already have, those working relationships. I think that whenever it comes to governance, that's always a tricky one, especially whenever you're starting to roll that into any type of distributed ledger technology. So governance it's basically taking our human interaction, our human agreements, whether it's a voting of a room or a nation, and saying, okay, well, let's duplicate that on chain. It's not that easy, right? It sounds easy, but it's not. So I think that the concept of the dynamic smart contract is potentially scalable to handle that. I think that it's dynamic enough that you can actually change it on the fly to where businesses can actually operate with it more efficiently and effectively. So you don't have to have a team of programmers come in and program a dynamic smart contract. So we're actually going to have libraries already built out per industry, and you actually don't have to know any programming language whatsoever once this is a final product. Right? So you'll actually be able to drag and drop and deploy, right? And if something changes, like let's say something changes between you and I, we can change that even after deployment. We can change that contract. As long as we both agree on it, then we can re-implement it on those changes. So how does that look for millions of users and massive companies? To be determined, but I believe that there's huge potential there. So it's thought about, and we're actually sitting down tomorrow night with one of our strategics to discuss that exact topic. So, great question. Probably not an exact answer for you.
It's a hard one to answer.
Yeah.
It's a very classical observation. There's consortiums that get formed, which then competitors go and form their own consortium, and it's a constant historical fact that then now you're talking about interoperability between these chains and these systems. My guess is that that's exactly how this is going to go too. That's one. The second thing is the immediate traction for this kind of technology would be intra-company versus inter-company. Multiple divisions, multiple, for example, an insurance carrier and multiple spun-off independent entities. That seems to be a more applicable use case for now until interoperability issues solved, and see where it goes. So, just my thoughts.
No, I actually totally agree with you, and I think that's the exact kind of like strategic goals we're trying to reach, right? So we're like, okay, well, who has the largest user base right now that we can get into? Telecom, right? Everybody touches it. It's entertainment based. We're talking millions of users. So if we can even just get one or two telecom companies on board with it, then kind of like the the chess pieces kind of start falling. I mean, that's our goal, right? But we obviously want to get into like other industries too. And we have a path that we want to go down that we believe is going to be effective. But that's where we're starting. And I think, you know, this is a big what if, right? I mean, let's say we get 500 or 5,000 companies all using this. There's no guarantee that they're all going to agree to like have interoperability, let alone play together. There's no guarantee. But I think if we could, you know, just like I think a lot of other people out there are trying to get to some kind of standard, standard agreements, standard like interoperability agreements, whatever that might be, whatever that looks like. I think as long as we're going towards that goal, right? As long as we're all marching towards the same path of what does that look like, what are the standards, then I think there's something that's, you know, something there.
So, question for you.
Sure.
But I'm an interim mid-sized company executive who introduces emerging tech into the company's bloodstream, and I do portfolio and program management of large company initiatives, not enterprises like these. So the question I have for you is, what kind of internal friction do you run into? And because that is literally what blocks many of these initiatives, where people who are not really expert at these new technologies, but just because they have the VPs and the other kind of titles want to play in this game because it's cool and sexy and they want to get involved into the whole thing, and pretty soon there's a buzzing mess in the whole organization. And sorting through that has been an interesting challenge for me successfully, but it's not easy. So what kind of friction have you run into during these kind of traps?
Oh, yeah, man, that's a really good question. So I think I kind of hit on it towards the beginning, right, is that whenever I first came up with this idea, I had this massive white paper, you know, and it's like, okay, well, I want to address all of these problems, and so, I mean, it took me like a long time to get through it and actually put it down on paper. You know, it's like a massive idea, like it actually could cause cancer if I didn't get it out of my head, right? But I got it out there, but the problem was, right, is that it was so massive that nobody on my team could even understand it. They couldn't even like wrap their head around it. And I would even like sit down and talk to people, you know, really, really like intelligent people, and they're just like, man, this is too much. This is like way too much, you know? And so I think the big internal conflict for me was you got to dumb it down, right? You got to make it smaller, you got to make it more streamlined. And I think for me the conflict was I don't want one more like Me Too application, you know, singular purpose application. Like I can't handle it. And so that's my own conflict. So there was kind of that internal battle with me and my team to narrow it down to like the core products. You know, if I had to strip it all away and I had to like say, okay, this is the bare minimum of what I want to have as a company, those were the tough conversations that I had to have. You know, and so I fought pretty hard to keep these 4 products, with obviously SwarmSync being my core, but I think that was the largest internal conflict.
Okay.
Sure.
That question, you're meaning the one payments. It sounds like you basically have your own exchange that you basically set up a contract more or less and go through it. And I imagine the output is then to whatever company's chain or whatever this is for. Are you like tied down by like the money lending laws and stuff like that, or what regulations you have to conform to?
Yeah, that's one we get asked all the time. So this is not an actual like exchange, right, where you're saying sell here, buy here, do that type of stuff, right? We're not doing that. This is a direct, just one-to-one exchange, right? So we're pulling in global rates right then, right? So you as a user, me as a user, like if we're exchanging, I'm going to pull in my global rates. Like let's say I need to pay you for a bike, for example, right? This isn't some massive exchange platform that everybody's trading on. Right? This is not a trading platform. This is just simply me saying, hey, I want to be able to pay you in 2 or 3 different currencies that I have. Maybe I've got some micro, maybe some dust here that I want to use for crypto. I want to add all that and apply it to a payment, right? But you get paid in whatever currency that you want. So we never actually touch it because the dynamic smart contracts on the network are completely decentralized, so there's no centralized control. So because of that, because we have no say in how that works, and it's just between 2 users, it's hands off for us.
how do you handle fiat? Then you like what sort of you just basically use any crypto like a tether or something? Or...
So that is the caveat, is that we don't allow external wallets. Right. So in order to do offline and online transactions, and in order to actually use the platform, auth in and ident securely, you have to use our wallet. Right. So regardless of what enterprise company takes this on, they have to use that wallet. What does that mean? I would say that for the majority of users out there, they're not going to care, right? So what I mean by that is you can have 5 different wallets called 5 different things, but the underlying wallet tech is the same wallet, right? So every one of these enterprise companies can have their own wallet. It doesn't matter, but the underlying tech is still our wallet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now, once a user actually moves in fiat or crypto or whatever asset into that wallet, right? Now it's on that network, it's in the system. And so now it allows us to actually control, right? If I spend that transaction, if I spend that money offline, it locks it out right then and there, right? So no double spend. And then as soon as the device comes online, or either one of the devices come online, then it gets processed, right? Does that make sense?
I think so. So you basically have your own, state more or less of like where whose tokens are whose at what time, kind of the back end then, like you kind of run like your own.
Yeah, so it's all decentralized, right? So I mean, there's no central entity that's sitting there saying, okay, this is where it's at. It's just the network already knows. So that's part of named data networking. So that's part of this future internet architecture piece too, right? And actually knowing like the state of what is on the network, which allows it to be infrastructure less. Right, so now I don't have to have specific routing protocols. I don't have to have gateways. I don't have to have somebody sitting there like routing my data around, right? So it now becomes infrastructure less and a trustful system. If that makes sense.
Sure. So where do you get your global rates from? Exactly for the whole exchange process?
Yep. So we have a decentralized AI that actually runs. And it pulls APIs from every exchange platform globally. It averages them out. Obviously, we filter out, through just a little bit of machine learning. It doesn't take that much, but we obviously filter out kind of like the bad actors, right? So they're just through like a little bit of intelligence. It's not that difficult, but I guess one could say like if you had enough bad actors out there giving enough bad information, you could potentially get, some bad rates, but I think that overall right now, average, it's going to be just fine.
And is that a centralized service that your company would provide, or is that?
It's all decentralized, so it's all rolled in to the stack. Yep, so we don't have any hands on it or control.
So I guess a follow-up to that is, so you've decided originally, so at least there's one person deciding what that stack would look like. So is there any governance, like when you say machine learning and AI can do this, but could that break and get fixed later on if something's wrong and the wrong oracles are used?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of like the other side of this, right, is that, so through SDKs and plugins, right, and through a company like taking this stack on and like developing their own network and then launching it, right? Now they have kind of that capability of, oh, hey, something isn't working here, we can stop it, right, before we lose millions or billions of dollars, fix it and turn it back on. So, I mean, that's kind of like the general concept. It's not quite that simple, but yes, that is the idea.
You talked about this named data networking. What is it and what does it mean?
Is that Duke? Hey, Duke. So named data networking actually has roots in Xerox PARC as part of content-centric networking. So it came from Van Jacobson. So Van Jacobson, for those of you that don't know, actually invented IP, so Internet Protocol. So Van Jacobson said later on, okay, obviously there's some limitations here. And so through National Science Foundation and some other initiatives, there was a lot of funding that came through and actually funded through the National Science Foundation and some others for content-centric networking. So it's actually future internet architecture to replace Internet Protocol. Right? So Internet Protocol is fundamentally, and this is once again my opinion, but I do have some data to back this up. The internet protocol is fundamentally broken, right? It's old school. It was never meant to like do what it's doing today. Right? And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to overwhelm it and have rolling blackouts. And so any company that is playing with IP in the next 10 years is going to be looking for companies that are not. So named data networking moved from Xerox PARC from content-centric networking to something that was a little bit more refined. So named data networking actually looks at the name of the information itself, right? So it's not, oh, well, your IP and that IP, and we're going to move it to this IP, and then you have to hack, the Wi-Fi system to get it through. So it actually looks directly at the name of the information itself, right? However, that it is unbound. So there's some things that you can do with it. You can even use it as just a middleware and wrap it in IP if you want. But the real concept here is that you're actually moving the information away from IP, and you're moving it out to the actual information itself, wherever that's coming from. And in this case, it's all the way out to the edge, whether it's an IoT device or a user, if you will. So the concept is to eliminate IP entirely. It's faster, it's infrastructure-less, it's self-healing, it's intelligent, it's the future.
Is there a good paper or resource place to learn more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can just hop on Google, just type in NDN or named data networking. There's this huge consortium out there, so tons of information. There's a huge resource on GitHub if you want to start playing with the code. It's all open source. So Cisco Systems, there's actually a lot of different companies that are part of that consortium, a bunch of different universities, just all kinds of stuff that you can find out there, but most of it's open source. And then Cisco Systems actually advanced it into ICN, or information-centric networking, so they have their own hybrid version of it, and it's open sourced as well. So depending on how crazy you want to get with it, but yeah, it's all out there. Yes, sir?
Is it the named data networking that is letting your swarm sync achieve speeds of 3 to 4 million transactions?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
With that, maybe we can thank Justin. That was awesome.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, so thank you all for coming.